All right, let's talk about an icon, a building that started as nothing more than a simple sketch and ended up becoming one of the greatest engineering sagas of all time, the Sydney Opera House.
So get this, the winning design that beat out over 200 others wasn't a blueprint. It was just a drawing. It had no math, no structural calculations, literally no plan. Engineers took one look at its magnificent sails and basically said, no way, it's unbuildable. And that one word, unbuildable, kicked off what would become a 14-year manufacturing war. It was a fight against physics itself, against messy politics, and really against the absolute limits of 1960s imagination.
And to fight that war, you needed an army. We're talking about a crew of 10,000 workers, all assembled just to attempt to turn this architectural dream into a concrete reality.
And the price tag? Oh, by the time the dust settled, the project was a staggering 1,400% over its original budget. 1,400%. So the big question is, with everything stacked against them, how in the world did they actually pull it off?
To understand how, we have to start from the ground up, literally. Long before anyone could even think about those iconic sails, it was all about building the foundation, a monumental stage for a performance that hadn't even been written yet. So the very first challenge was building this enormous 1.8-hectare concrete stage. They had to dig all the way down to this 600-million-year-old sandstone and then drive 500 concrete piers deep into the rock just to make sure the whole thing didn't slide into the ocean. What they built was the largest concrete mold Australia had ever seen. But here's where the first disaster strikes. See, they were building this foundation based on one plan, while the architect was still trying to figure out the physics for the roof. The two teams were dangerously out of sync, and when that final roof design landed, it was a concrete monster, way heavier than planned. The brand new foundation they'd just built, it couldn't support it. Not even close. I mean, can you imagine? They were facing an absolute nightmare scenario. After pouring 40,000 hours of work into that foundation, they came to a chilling realization. The only way to move forward was to tear down what they had just built and start all over again.
So, with that incredibly costly setback behind them, they finally moved on to the main event, the part everyone knows, creating those magnificent and supposedly impossible sails.
And yeah, they immediately hit a wall. A big one. The problem was, these elegant, soaring curves that looked so beautiful on paper were an engineering nightmare. In the real world, made of concrete, they simply couldn't hold up their own weight. This is where things get really cool. The math was just too complex to do by hand. We're talking, it would have taken about 100 years. So, in what was probably a moment of desperation, they turned to a 1960s superpower, one of the world's first mainframe computers. It still took 2,000 hours of number crunching, but that computer helped them invent a whole new kind of geometry. And that led to the aha moment, the big one. They called it the spherical solution. The idea was pure genius. What if every single one of those complex, unique ribs wasn't unique at all? What if each one was just a different slice from the same single sphere? Suddenly, they didn't have to solve thousands of equations, just one. This breakthrough turned an impossible art project into a solvable manufacturing puzzle. And this is how they brought it to life. They basically built a factory right there on site. They created a master mold, welded these massive steel cages for all 2,400 ribs, poured in a custom liquid stone concrete mix, and then, this is the best part, they steam cured these 15-ton ribs in just 24 hours instead of weeks. It was an assembly line for a masterpiece. So, the massive concrete bones are finally in place. Now, the structure needs a skin. And this, of course, brought on a whole new set of manufacturing challenges, shifting from brute force concrete to delicate precision. The answer was over 1 million custom ceramic tiles. And get this, they were made in Sweden, shipped halfway across the world, came in 2 finishes to deal with sun and glare, and were even designed to clean themselves in the rain. An amazing detail. But again, there was a problem. Placing them by hand would have taken another 50 years. So what do? They invent another manufacturing miracle, of course. They built a lid factory on site that arranged all those tiles into a chevron pattern on pre-made panels. This turned a painstaking construction task into a product assembly line. You could just bolt the skin right onto the skeleton. Genius. But while the exterior was this triumph of innovation, a civil war was brewing inside.
The government started panicking at the exploding budget and withheld payments. This forced the original architect, Jorn Utzon, to resign in disgust. A new team was brought in, left with the impossible task of finishing the interior of a masterpiece they had no part in creating.
Somehow, despite all that internal chaos, the project was finally completed. The manufacturing war ended when the Opera House opened its doors in 1973. But today, a whole new generation of technology is required to keep this 60-year-old icon alive.
Just look at the way the building is maintained today. It highlights this incredible shift from past to future. Back then, it was all about grit, workers walking the shells 200 feet up with no safety harnesses. Today, a digital nervous system, a network of sensors, tells engineers exactly how the building is handling the harbor winds.
And that original spirit of innovation is still going. Instead of workers tapping thousands of tiles with hammers to find defects, acoustic robots now listen to the heartbeat of the ceramic. And instead of divers, underwater drones patrol the foundation, protecting it from the constant threat of salt.
You know, when you step back and look at the final scale of this so-called unbuildable dream, the numbers are just breathtaking. 16 years, 10,000 workers, over 1 million tiles. Every single number here tells a story of incredible perseverance.
So yeah, the manufacturing war was finally won. But it leaves us with one final thought. It was a project that cost a fortune, and it cost an architect his career. But it also gave a country an identity, proving that sometimes manufacturing the impossible is what's necessary to build a true legacy.